I will come to you in the silence. I will lift you from all your fear. You will hear my voice. I claim you as my choice. Be still and know I am here.
Hello, everyone. It's really nice to talk with you, but it's different, I have to say, because in the past when we've had these great discussions in these Bible study classes, we were in the same room and I was actually able to hear you and talk to you and have an interchange with you. And now I'm in a room in my office by myself with my iPad balanced on a chair, hoping it doesn't fall off, and none of you in sight. And I know you hopefully will be able to watch this, so it'll be posted tomorrow, and you can watch it anytime that you want to, and hopefully you'll watch it before Tuesday at noon. And at noon, our second portion of this kind of experiment that we're doing will be a Zoom chat, a Zoom discussion that we'll have at noon, up to an hour. I'll send an email to you as well as post the instructions about how to get onto Zoom. You have to have an app for your phone or your iPad or your computer. But if you don't want to do Zoom, you don't have to. There will also be a call-in number that you can call in for just a telephone conference. So you can just talk on your phone. So that'll be our big experiment, and hopefully it'll work. This study is called, as you've heard already, Unafraid in an Uncertain World. There's not a particular book for it that you need to buy to prepare, but you'll have some questions that will be posted at the same time the video is posted that will tell you what we're going to discuss. So, and a lot of it will be things that you're learning from your own lives and from what we're learning in the media, what you learn from reading the Bible, what you learn from many sources like that. So I think that will be okay. Technology, as you can tell from my description, is going to be a challenge. And it's always been a challenge for me. 50 years ago, only 50 years ago, I was a student teacher in Lubbock, Texas, at Monterey High School. I was teaching sophomore English, and I was using the latest technology. We had a record player and a film strip projector, and they were synced, sort of, so that when the record player would make a little beep sound, then you forwarded your film strip to the next picture. So I was trying to do that with my supervisor there for my student teaching. I was doing this for this class, and nothing would work. And all of a sudden, the students started kind of laughing in the background. And one of them said, "Miss French," was my maiden name, "Miss French, you plugged in the Christmas tree instead of the record player." And of course, everybody laughed. I even laughed because I thought it was pretty funny. The Christmas tree was blinking like crazy in the background. So only 50 years later, we're going to be having these videos put on YouTube and then somewhere on a cloud. I'm not even sure about that, how that works. And then Zoom conversation where as many as 20 people might be trying to work together to have a discussion. So while technology has changed, somehow the person trying to do the technology has not kept up with it quite that well. So we'll do the best we can, and I think we'll do fine. You can see the topic really is face your fear with faith. So that's what we need to keep thinking about as we talk about different fears and anxieties that we all experience all the time. So Our 4 topics, our 4 weeks, our topics are going to be living with fear and anxiety. That's this today's topic. Thriving in uncertain world of COVID-19 and other types of plagues that have been part of our, not just our, but the world's lives for centuries. Coping with loneliness and isolation. Facing change, aging and illness, and remembering, do not fear, for I am with you. And the Lord is my light, my salvation. Whom shall I fear? So those are the topics that we're going to be talking about. And you'll also see a printout that will be posted online. I'll email that to you as well, since I have most everybody's email. The first section of this study was really intended to discuss fear and anxiety before the pandemic. Before 2020, we all had fears. We all had anxiety then, and now, if we only knew what we had coming, we might not have even had these fears. But we know that fear is not always bad. Fear, and we've heard of fight or flight. Fear sometimes because our bodies, our brains, our adrenaline, all hormones all pitch in to allow us to anticipate maybe when we're in danger that actually help ourselves. So fear, we're not saying in this or any other discussion that fear is all bad. Fear can be good. Fear can protect us sometimes. It can let us either confront danger or escape from danger. And we were afraid before 2020. We were still afraid of maybe losing a job or losing a position, or that people might really find us out. They realized that we weren't quite the person that we pretended to be, or people thought we were. We were concerned about losing our savings, about having enough retirement for our future. We were concerned about our relationships, about illness, and then ultimately how we might die. I mean, we have all these kinds of stresses and fears have been there with us through much of our lives. Have you ever exhibited, speaking of fight or flight, this kind of super strength that occurs when you get into a fight or flight situation? How did it affect you? And when we have our discussion, I'd like to hear about some people's specific stories about their fight or flight. It reminded me of one of when I was a kid in the very small town where I grew up. We were riding around one night riding in the back of a pickup truck, which of course people shouldn't do and shouldn't have done then, but we all did. And we decided to go take a couple of watermelons out of a watermelon patch. I normally don't take things that don't belong to me. And this example may be the reason why, one reason why at least. But while we were out trying to pick up a ripe watermelon out of the watermelon patch, somebody yelled in the background and we took off running. Well, I'm not much of a runner, as you can tell, but I ran faster than the boys or the other girls that were in this little group of about 5 of us. And we ran all the way down the road, jumped over a ditch, and ran as far as we could until we realized that another one of our friends had played a joke on us, and that was the person. We weren't going to get shot. We were just being tricked. So, but anyway, I remember to this day the adrenaline when the fear was making me think any minute somebody's going to shoot a shotgun at you for trying to steal a watermelon. So, and Tommy Williams is actually familiar with this little town because that was one of his assignments early in his career. Of course, not that early, not that long ago. He would even know a couple of people involved in this little escapade in addition to me. Has fear ever kept you from doing something you wanted to do, needed to do, or could do? Are you risk averse? Or do you know people who are not risk averse? We know that our fear keeps us from taking certain risks that could endanger us, as we've talked about. But we also know that fear can kind of paralyze us and keep us from doing something that we really want to do. And we'll talk about that as well. There are many stories like that. I was thinking about, back in the East Texas, there were always a story about someone having the opportunity to buy some land, and they didn't want to risk the money, so they didn't. And the next person who bought the land actually struck oil on it and became very wealthy. There are many, many stories like that where certain reticence from some of us kept us from taking a risk that another person was willing to take. And there are lots of stories like that. But I was talking about having analysis paralysis. When you're so afraid of doing something, or the result might not be a good one, then we go through an intensive analysis of the good and bad, I guess, things that could happen. So that keeps us from actually doing anything. So fear can stand in our way. Fear can keep us from doing what we want to do or need to do to succeed. What we need to focus on at this time and in any point in our lives comes from Philippians 4, 8, and 9. Focus on what is true, honorable, just, pure, commendable, things worthy of praise. Practice these, and the God of peace will be with you. Now we're having a lot of trouble making decisions. We're having trouble making plans for the future. We're making trouble with the simplest decisions. Should I wash my hands? Should I wear gloves? Should I wear a mask? Can I go to the store? If I do, what time should I go? Should I go see my grandchildren? Should I visit a friend? Should I? What should I do? And not really knowing the answer. I mean, some of it is kind of common sense, but some of it we really don't know the answer. So we have a lot of hesitation to make the simplest of decisions. And fear can keep us from doing that. And if you'll read Numbers 13, 30 through 33, it's a story that we're all familiar with. Moses, as you know Moses. Moses had led the people from Egypt going to the promised land. They had God on their side. God has been leading them through many different ways throughout this whole journey. Well, they get to just the crest of going into the promised land, and Moses decides to send the 12 spies to see what is it like. What are we going to encounter when we go there? We don't know. They didn't have any film. They didn't have any cameras. They had no idea really what they were going to see and how difficult it might be and what the land was really going to be like. So the spies, one from each tribe, the spies go into the promised land. And they stay a while, they do their investigation, and they come back. And 10 of the spies tell Moses, it is the land of milk and honey. It is the promised land. It is a great place. But we can't go there because we can't defeat those people. There are a lot of tribes in there. They're big people, and we really don't think we have the ability to defeat them. So we'll go in there and we'll get crushed. Well, God, as you know, had been telling them, look, I'm on your side. I'm going to be with you. I'm telling you, you can do this. You just need to have faith in me and do it. Well, then you had Joshua and Caleb who said that they thought they could do it and they should go, but the vote basically was taken and they decided not to. Well, God was not particularly pleased with this. He said, look, I've told you I would support you. You don't have faith in me. So as a result, you should have feared God and not feared the different tribes in the promised land and done what I told you. So for 40 years, no one in this group is going to go to the promised land. You're going to wander for 40 years until every last one of you dies, and not a single one of this generation who were faithless are going to go to the promised land. So this was one of the first stories in the Bible talking about the need for faith and having faith and doing what you should do, and if you didn't, what the result might be. So this was fear for these people overcame their faith. And in fact, at the end of the story, you remember they were saying, you know, we should have never even left Egypt. This is worse than we were before. So we shouldn't have, why would we have had faith? We should have just stayed where we knew what was going. We were slaves, but we knew what the deal was, and we could have just stayed with the place we knew, as opposed to trying to go to this promised land. So, so that's an idea. That's an area where there's the fear of God, and God was not pleased when they did not have faith, that he was really with them. So when we're talking about face your fear with faith, that's a great example of it. We're also afraid of many things, but we're afraid of the other. And we'll talk about this a bit in another session. There was a book written that said, you know, I would like you better if you were more like me. And so why are we afraid of the other? Are we afraid because people aren't like us, because they speak a different language, because they're from a different place, because they might want to infringe on what I'm doing? They might want to be my friend and I don't want them. They might ask something of me and I don't want to do that. So why are we afraid? But the bigger question is, have we ever been the other? Have you ever been the other? And if you were the other, how does that feel? How does that feel, just in a few words, how does it feel to be the other? Sometimes we can be the other within a group of people who are very similar to us. So how does it feel to be the other in a church? Do you feel like you're not wanted, or you're not part of the group, or you don't dress like everybody else, or you don't talk like everybody else? Maybe you have different politics from other people. If you are the other, and how can we be welcoming to other people if we treat them like the other? Fear is mentioned in the Old Testament over 500 times. And I will, do not be afraid is mentioned over 140 times in the New Testament. Now, you don't have to go and recount all that if you don't want to, but that's approximate numbers because different translations of the Bible are different. But you think about that for generations, for eons, from the beginning of time, fear has been dealt with. Fear is, you should be afraid of some things, but not of others. You should let fear have you do the right thing, but not keep you from doing what you need to do. I was thinking about a fear story, and that's the story of, in Samuel, 1 Samuel, of David and Goliath. Why do you think Goliath was a giant? Well, if you remember his description, he was huge. He had a big helmet, he had a big breastplate, a huge sword. His sword weighed, pounds and pounds. He had a big voice, and he would taunt people and yell at them and challenge them. And so I thought, what was the point of the Goliath being a giant? I thought, could it be that Goliath is an example of our fear? And when you're afraid, does your fear sometimes become so big that you really don't even know how to deal with it? Your fear can be overwhelming. It can keep you awake at night. It can make you very stressed. It can make you very anxious because it is bigger than you are. Well, but your fear, whatever you fear, is not bigger than your relationship with Christ or your relationship with God. It's not bigger. That Goliath was a huge giant, but he was defeated by a young kid. Excuse me. King Saul, who was the first king of the Israelites, was also afraid. King Saul, a powerful man, was afraid of David. King Saul was terrified. Let me get a sip of water. Was terrified of Samuel's prophecy. King Saul was afraid that the Philistines might make a mockery of his death. So King Saul decided to throw himself on his own sword and take his own life rather than be killed by the enemy. So even though he was the first king, his life was kind of wrought with fear. So has fear ever robbed you of anything? Do you regret not having done something in your life? Have you lived in fear of something that never happened? I mean, that is something, we all do that. But have you ever thought, I was afraid of that for so many years. Then I realized I got beyond it and it never happened. I've spent a lot of time being afraid of something that didn't happen. It reminded me of a fear that my dad had. He had a wife and 3 girls, and he really did not want us going anywhere, the 4 of us, and leaving him at home because he was afraid something might happen to us and leave him alone permanently. And that was the fear he brought up a number of times through the years, and it never happened. All of those people, now except for my one sister, are gone, and his fear of something happening and leaving him never occurred, which I'm glad it never occurred. But have you been afraid of something that really never happened, but it made you be anxious? Speaking of anxiety, I found this publication in the grocery store that I thought gave a good example of what anxiety looks like. And if you look at the title, it's the age of anxiety, talking about today. And it's almost like this is the age of super anxiety, because whatever anxiety we had in the past seems like it's been amplified for the present or the future. There's over $4 billion worth of anxiety drugs that are prescribed every year. Not all anxiety is bad, just like not all fear is bad. Sometimes it makes you perform better. But too much anxiety can shut you down. High levels of stress can cause heart attacks and strokes. They can affect your immune system. And this is nothing new, because if you look back at Moses' story 3,500 years ago, if you look at that story, you see that a plague was infecting the people involved in that Moses story. These plagues have been throughout history, so there's nothing new. People cope with stress many ways, and if you want to know, you can read it in any magazine you pick up just about. The ways to deal with stress, the ways to exercise at home, the ways to cook at home, the ways to do things to help cope with the anxiety and the stress. But they're also sleep, prayer, meditation, friends, music, and more. Those kinds of things help us deal with our stress. And prayer could be the number one thing. What stokes our fear? You know, we have something in our society today that wasn't present in the past, and that's the 24/7 news cycle. And we hear bad news from the four corners of the earth. That really wasn't the case years ago. I mean, we hear, if you think about it, look at how many times have you seen the ice melt in Greenland, in Iceland? We probably are seeing the same film over and over, but you see that and you think, oh my, what does this mean for our sea level? What does this mean for future, for climate change? What does this mean? That one film alone can increase your stress level. We see, you know, obviously sad, horrible things that happen. We hear only bad news, and we hear about the economy and how it's affected and the number of people out of work. We hear about all of these things that give us nothing but more things to be anxious about. And we now have what we call quarantine fatigue, where we've been isolated too long and away from people, away from our regular lives too long. So all of these stresses are affecting us, and we need to remember that life is better now than it was ever before. If we do not see things as they are, we don't see things as they are, but how we are. If we expect evil, we'll see evil. If we expect bad, then we're not going to see the blessings every day. So what we expect, what our view of the world is going to also impact how we deal with stress and how we deal with fear. There's a saying that, well, there's nothing left for us to do but pray. Well, maybe we should be praying all along and not wait to the last minute. People who talk about the good old days sometimes have a bad memory about what the good old days were. And I'd just like to go back to this point of face fear with faith. There's a song, one of my favorite old hymns, God Will Take Care of You. And I'm just not going to sing it, but I'll say a few words of it. Be not dismayed, whate'er betide, God will take care of you. Beneath the wings of love abide, God will take care of you. God will take care of you through every day or all the way. He will take care of you. God will take care of you. The last story I want to tell you is about faith and about the faith that God will take care of you. In 1925, think about that. 1925, what was happening? Well, we're about to enter into the Great Depression. And of course, these were the years leading up to the Second World War, just out of the first one. There, a man who lived, a farmer, very poor, did not own a farm, but lived in a little house on a farm with his wife and 8 children. The children ranged in age from 4 to 16. He died in 1925. His funeral was on Christmas Eve. They sang that song at his funeral. God will take care of you. His wife was a devout Methodist. She lived a very strict life. She was a no-nonsense person, but a revered person by her children and by her small little community. She never owned or drove a car. She never owned a house, but she raised 8 children on her own through the Depression and the years to follow. When she moved into town from the little farm where they lived, when she moved into town, she never lived in anything larger than a little apartment that would be attached to someone else's house. She never had owed any money to anyone. And when she died at 83 years old, all of her children were gainfully employed. All of them had reached adulthood, and all of them were good people. So I realized when I was thinking about it, with all the prayer she must have done, and the stories are that she did a lot, and all of her devotion and all of her strict principles in living the good life she lived, that she had faith that God would take care of her and her family. And I finally realized in thinking about it, you know what? She was right. She had lived an abundant life. And Reverend Tommy mentioned that about people who don't have a lot of possessions, material possessions, but lead an abundant life. She lived a very abundant life. And when she died, she knew that she had been right. So, everyone, I look forward to talking to you Tuesday. We may have a little trouble getting it all started, but we'll do it. I also thought this Psalms 27:1, the Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life, of whom shall I be afraid? And I'd like for you to join me in a prayer for our group and for all of us. Dear Lord, help us be strong and courageous. Help us have the faith to not be afraid or discouraged, and to know that you will be with us wherever we go. That was from Joshua 1:9. If you have any questions about what we're going to do or how we're going to proceed, or if you don't get the information, you can call me. My cell phone number is available to you, 409-781-2627, or send me an email or text and I will get back to you. I look forward to working with you and meeting with you and talking with you, and hope that this can be helpful to all of us. Thank you very much. Bye.